actually isn't oh, there we go. Thank you. Fun fact, I was actually once speaking at an event about 3 weeks ago at a nightclub. The microphone went out, and I did the whole thing with just my lungs, and it was very, very fun. I love yelling at people. It's a good time. Also, I hope you can all see me. I accidentally matched the background, so if I'm blending in too much, let me know. I'll move around a little. So thank you so much for the introduction. First off, I love Club Z. I actually spoke to Club Z Brooklyn. Represent. But I do have to say, I grew up in New Jersey, so to Livingston out there, I've gone to Livingston a ton of times. I love Livingston. God bless. Okay. So my name's Adela Cojab, and like you heard before, my family's originally from Syria and from Lebanon. And as Jews do, they got kicked out, and they made their way to Mexico, of all places. I was born in Mexico. I grew up there until I was 5, and then my family moved to Deal, New Jersey, and I got to grow up in New Jersey for the rest of my life. I grew up in the Syrian Jewish community, which is very Zionist, so I always knew Zionism and Judaism was part of my identity. But like I told you guys before, it's not what I wanted to do in college. So I applied to NYU Early Decision 1. I had no other plan. My only goal from when I was in 4th grade was to go to NYU and be a leader. When people said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I just said, I want to be an NYU student. I don't know why. For some reason, I felt I needed to be there. So I went to NYU pre-college. My brother had gone to NYU. I became an NYU pre-college ambassador. I applied early decision. And when my college advisor said, what's your backup? I said, I don't have a backup. He said, what if you don't get in? I said, I'll go to Israel for the year, and then I'll apply again. Because for some reason, I felt I needed to be there. So I get to NYU my freshman year. Lo and behold, I get in, best day of my life. Get there my freshman year, didn't stay at the Jewish dorm, didn't want to be involved really in Jewish life. I had a radio show at WNYU. I was on student government. I've always been a student government kid. And, I really started doing a lot of great advocacy work there. I found that group, Realize Israel, that gave me the flag. I realized I had a cause to fight for. And from that moment in the park that I talked about before, I decided to join the pro-Israel life. By the end of my freshman year, I became vice president, and by the end of my sophomore year, I became the president. But I was still doing all of my activism for the community of NYU on student government. And really, everything was great for 2 years. But my junior year, everything became about Israel-Palestine on campus. And it all started with one mention of Zionism in the same category as Nazism and fascism and racism. This was a statement put out by the Minority Student Council. Now, I had been on student council for 3 years. We were doing amazing work. We were doing food insecurity work, trying to get Metro cards for students. And when I saw this statement come out, I wrote an email to the president of the Minority Student Council. I said, hey, I saw the statement that you wrote. Do you have time to talk about it? And she just replied, no, because I don't talk to fascists. And that was the first time that I really felt singled out for who I am and what I do. So I got the Jewish community together, and I said, look, this statement came out from the Minority Student Council. Let's get together and write a letter, not angry, but disappointed that our fellow students don't understand why it's so offensive to us as the Jewish community, why it hurts us so much to put Zionism and Nazism in the same category of all things. So we got together and we wrote this letter and we were ready to publish it. And the night before we were ready to go, I get a call from a mentor of mine. He was an older Jewish man, also very involved in the Jewish world. He worked for the university. And he said, hey, I heard that you guys are writing a letter. And I said, yes, we are. And he said, are you sure you want to publish it? I said, of course, why not? And he said, well, do you really want to start a war? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, realistically, how many people saw that statement from the Minority Student Council? You only saw it because you read your emails and you're on student government. I don't even think half of student government reads their emails. I don't think anyone in the student body even read it. If you didn't read it, we wouldn't even know about it. So if you just draw attention to this issue, you're going to make it much bigger. If their narrative is that Jewish students don't care about minority communities, then aren't you feeding into their narrative if you write a letter that's calling out the minority community? And I thought about it, and he just kept telling me, if you draw attention to the issue, it'll get bigger, and if you ignore it, it'll go away. And I sat there. At the time, I had 17 Jewish organizations that were behind me. Those are, all the Jewish organizations except for one at NYU. You can guess which one. I'll tell you later. And I thought about it, and it was the night before, and I made the executive decision not to publish that statement. Until this day, I'll tell you, I wouldn't do anything differently, but I have 2 regrets, and this is the first one. Because the next day, we didn't publish that letter, but over the next 2 months, NYU became one of the most anti-Semitic campuses in the United States. Because 2 weeks after that statement came out, that statement that I was told to ignore, we started getting hit and hit and hit. Because after that, we had a resolution on NYU student government against our NYU Tel Aviv campus. 2 weeks after that, we had 53 student groups, that's 1 in every 6 at NYU, pledging to boycott not only Israel, the country, but Realize Israel, the club that I was president of. And 2 weeks after that, we had a coalition of over 70 professors signing a letter against all Israeli academics. At this point, I was meeting with the school almost every week. The first time I had met with them and I told them about the statement and I told them about the resolution, they said, "What do you want us to do about this?" And I said, "For now, keep this on your radar, because I feel something big is coming, and I'm afraid for my community." And again, we were hit, and we were hit, and we were hit. If you were a Jewish student, you'd be walking into your class knowing your professor was openly against you. So things started escalating more, started getting more personal. They started posting pictures of Jewish students on social media, calling them the fascists of the week. I was in the Middle Eastern Studies department. I was a Middle Eastern Studies major at the time, and I started being boycotted. It got to the point that if I walked into my classes, everyone would just stop and stare at me, and I know that they were just talking about me before. One point, leading up to Yom HaAtzmaut, everything changed. Usually we have this event called the Rave in the Park. We rent out Washington Square at NYU. We fly in a DJ from Israel, and the park fills with hundreds of Jewish students wrapped in Israeli flags singing Hatikva. Every year my mom comes. Remember, we're Syrian, Lebanese, Mexican. My mom comes every year, and she looks out into that audience of 300 Jewish students with their Israeli flags singing Hatikva, and she says, this here is Judaism in the 21st century. Where else do you see proud Jews so proud of their Judaism? You don't see that in Mexico. You definitely don't see that in Syria. But you're seeing it in the heart of New York City. And it's usually a beautiful event that every year gives me goosebumps. But I knew that year would be different. So I met with the school again, and I said, "We're about to have this big event for Yom HaAtzmaut, and I'm worried for student safety." And the school told me, "Adela, I think you're overreacting, nothing's gonna happen." And I said, "Please, I'm very worried for my community." Again, they ignored me, and the event starts. And do you want to know how it kicks off? Over 100 students amass in protest. And the way it starts is with an anti-Israel student making his way to the center with an Israeli flag in hand, throwing it on the ground, and letting it burn. 2 other students began to pour gasoline to make the flames bigger. And I could tell you every Jewish student in that park stared at that flag in horror. I told my community, "Don't worry, let's get back to the rave, let's get back to the party. Don't focus on them, focus on us." So we continue, we're trying to have a good time. Usually people pass by, we give them bamba, we talk, we give them flags. This year, the vibes were a little bit off. And then that moment where we're singing Hatikva, that beautiful moment that gives me goosebumps every year. As we're singing, starting off, another anti-Israel student, one I was actually in 2 classes with, comes to the center, grabs the microphone from a Jewish girl, shoves her, and starts yelling, "Free, free Palestine, free, free Palestine." At that point, NYPD surrounds him. I see all the Jewish students starting to not sure what to do. The NYPD gets him out of there. At that point, we look up, and we realize they had stolen our other Israeli flags, tore them to shreds, and hung them from trees and lampposts. So at this point, I went back to the school. NYPD had made 2 arrests: property theft and damage, reckless endangerment, assault and battery. And I told the school, a line has been crossed. And the school sat, and they said, "You know what, you're right. You're right. A line has been crossed." And I said, "You need to take action." And they said, yeah, we're gonna take action, but we're gonna do it behind the scenes. And I said, excuse me? And they said, yeah, we don't want the narrative to be that NYU is choosing one side over the other. So, we're going to do what we have to do, but we're going to do it quietly. And I said, okay, do what you have to do, however you need to do it. But I'm trusting you. My community is scared and my community is angry. I'm not imagining non-existing threats. There's been threats with physical action to the point that 2 arrests were made. My community has a right to feel scared because they're acting on the threats they've been making for months. And the school told me, yeah, don't worry, we're gonna take action. And I walked out of there, and that is my second regret. Again, I wouldn't do it differently. But I walked out of there, and the Jewish community, all the students I represented, they all told me I was being naive. They told me I was being stupid, and they said, believe me, the school isn't gonna do anything. Now, at this point, I had left the Middle Eastern Studies department, and I had left student government. And if you want later on during Q&A, I'll tell you the reasons why. But I decided that I'm just gonna focus on graduating. So I leave everything, I focus on graduating, I start taking classes in creative writing and dance, just so I can get enough credits. And about 2 months before graduation, I see a notification from my email. NYU decides to give the President's Service Award, which is the highest honor you can get as a group on campus, to Students for Justice in Palestine, the group that spent 2 years harassing the Jewish community. So I see the award, I roll my eyes, and I just continue doing my work. I start getting texts, screenshots from my friends like, hey, did you see this award? And I'm like, oh yeah, I saw it. Another friend, hey, did you see that happen? I'm like, yeah, typical NYU giving awards to anti-Semites. Another friend sends it to me. I'm like, LOL, crazy. Until one friend called me up and said, Adela, have you seen the award? And I said, yes, I saw. He said, you have to do something about it. And I said, honestly, I've given 3 years of my life to this. I'm 2 months from graduation. I don't think it's my place anymore. It's not my fight. And he said, it is your fight. I said, no, it's really not. And he said, okay, well, can you at least get us the meeting with the vice president of NYU? I thought about it, and I said, you know what? I spent a full 2 years meeting with the vice president of student affairs, with the Center of Multicultural Education, with student conduct, with public safety, with, who else? Center for Student Life. I met with 8 administrators across 5 departments consistently. At this point, anyone in the administration had gotten an email from Adela saying like, hey, it's Adela, I want to talk about rising anti-Semitism. And every single time I had a meeting, I followed up, I said, hey, thank you for meeting with me to talk about rising anti-Semitism. So at this point, I felt very comfortable with the administration because I met with them multiple times. So I said, yes, I could get you a meeting with the vice president. So I call the vice president of NYU, and it goes to voicemail. Call again, secretary picks up, tells me he's very busy. Send an email, goes unanswered. Send another email, unanswered. So I decide to go physically to his office. So I show up to his office. His secretary sees me. She knows exactly who I am. She's like, hey, Adela, look, he's very busy. He doesn't have time for you. I'm like, please, I just really need to chat with him for a couple of minutes. She's like, no, he doesn't have time. I'm like, no, I'll wait for him to come out. She said, please leave. And I said, no, I'm going to wait until he comes out. And I sat outside of his door. And she said, please sit on a chair. And I said, no, I'm going to sit on the floor outside of his door until he comes out. Took him about 45 minutes. He finally comes out. And I find him, and I'm like, hi, my community. He's like, look, I saw your email. And I'm, please, do you have some time? He's like, no, I have to go. And I'm like, where are you walking? I'll walk with you. He's like, Adela, I just don't have time. I said, please meet with me. He said, how about the first week of May? I was like, first week of May? He said, yes, I'm very busy. I said, it's February. He said, yep. And I said, you can't meet with me for 2.5 months. He said, no, I'm much too busy. Looks over to his secretary and says, put Adela down for the first week of May. And I walked out of there. And at that point, it felt personal because I spent weeks and weeks and weeks meeting with him. And now he won't even give me 10 minutes. And I realized at that moment that NYU didn't want to make a change. Because want to know what the first week of May was? The week of my final exams and the week before my graduation. Because if Adela graduates, then no one's doing anything about the problem. NYU doesn't want to make a change. I started thinking a little bit more, and I said, not only did the school not take action behind the scenes, and not only did the school not even do anything, right? I would have understood if the school just did nothing. But to proactively give an award that didn't have to be given. At that moment, NYU was saying, you want to know how to become an award-winning group? You want to know how to get recognized on campus? You're going to pick a minority community. You're going to boycott them. You're going to socially isolate them. You're going to post pictures of them on social media. You're going to burn their flag, assault their members, get arrested for it. And then NYU will give you the highest honor on campus, so long as that community is Jewish. Now let's talk about how I got to that realization, because I started thinking of the flag burning. The flag burning. Now, I'm from Mexico. I'm not yet a US citizen. And you can say that, oh, I'm not anti-Semitic. It's just a political stance. I'm burning an Israeli flag because of my politics. If someone at NYU burned a Mexican flag as a political stance against immigration, do you think NYU would stay silent? Now you want to say Zionism's an identity, right? You self-identify as a Zionist. Sure. If a student at NYU burned an LGBTQ flag, do you think they would get an award for burning it? Now let's talk about outside of politics, outside of identity. I come from Greek life. I don't know if you could tell, but I was vice president of my sorority. And I was on the Panhellenic Council, the Inter-Greek Council. I was on all the councils. I loved my sorority, and I still do. Are you telling me that if one fraternity burned the flag of another, they'd be allowed to recruit in the spring? I know the answer is no, and I know immediately they would get suspended. So why is it the only flag you can burn is mine? And then I started thinking back, and I realized why. It's because of the mentality of the Jews of the past. I think back to that mentor of mine that called me the night before, the one who told me, if you call out the problem, you're going to make it bigger, and if you ignore it, it'll go away. Why was that the way he thought? Because the Jews of the past, being Jewish made you different, and being different made you a target. So when being Jewish became too dangerous, the Jews of the past would hide their Judaism. They would either flee or hide to survive. And that's every single one of our histories. That's true if you're Russian. That's true if you're European, Eastern, or Western. That's true if you're Middle Eastern like me. The reason why I'm here in the US, why my family's in Mexico, the rest is in Brazil, why you're here, as opposed to in the countries your grandparents and great-grandparents were from, is because that's been the reality for Jewish people throughout centuries. When we got stepped on, we would apologize for our foot being there in the first place, and we would move over. But we're not the Jews of the past. Why? Because we have a home, we have a staple, we have a place called Israel. We're not the wandering Jew that if it's not safe for us where we are, we have to go somewhere else so we can't draw attention to our Judaism. We're the Jews that have a country and we have a home. And because of Israel's existence, I can exist as a proud diaspora Jew, because without it, I would have to hide my Judaism when it got dangerous. The Jews of today, every one of you in these chairs, when we get stepped on, we shouldn't apologize and move over. We should tell them our feet have a right to be there, just like everyone else. So I walked out of that office, out of that meeting where they said first week of May. I walked out that second week of February, and I got in touch with lawyers. And I asked them if I had a case against the school. Now the lawyers, they told me straight up, no. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which states that every institution that receives federal funds, so academic institutions, have a right to prevent discrimination and harassment, only applies to race, ethnicity, and nationality. It doesn't apply to faith-based religions. So they said, unfortunately, even if there's been discrimination, Judaism doesn't fall under the protected categories. We're sorry, Adela, but you don't have a case. And I said, let me send you everything I have. I have emails, I have screenshots, I have videos, I have police records. And they said, send it over. I sent them over 70 pages of documents. Never date me, it's a horrible time. I kept a really good paper trail. And I got a call back from the lawyers within the same day, and they said, this is the strongest case we've seen. And they said, look, we don't think you're gonna win, but your case could be the foot in the door that could change Jewish legal history in America. Are you ready to file? And I hung up that phone, and I called my mom, and I said, Mom, I'm suing NYU for anti-Semitism. Now, let's fast forward a little bit. I met with the lawyers, we drafted my complaint, and we filed my case, but we did it quietly. And we decided everything would go to press one day in April. So that day comes, April 26th, and I'm walking through campus that Monday morning, and I get a call to my cell phone from the vice president of NYU. And I pick up, and he says, hi, Adela, and I say, hi. It's the vice president of NYU. And I said, of course. And he said, hey, I'm reading something here about some Title VI lawsuit. Can you come into my office? And I said, I'm really busy. But how about the first week of May? And I did show up that first week in May. And when I showed up, I didn't say, my community were scared, please, this award. No. I showed up with a calendar. And I opened it and I said, here's every time I met with you over the last 2 years. And because you wouldn't even give me 10 minutes, you're gonna have to deal with the lawsuit. Now, I'm gonna go on a very quick tangent, right? I've always been a student government kid, right? I was president of my middle school, I was in student government in my high school, I was in student government in my college, and now I'm in law school, and guess where I'm at? Student government. I've never been an activist. I've always been an advocate. I've always been the kind of person that tries to make change from the top down. I never try to flip the table. But I realize that if activism, if noise is the only thing he'll listen to, if the only thing will bring a change is a headline, I'll make the headlines. So I went ahead and I filed my case. I did graduate, thank God, they gave me my diploma, and I'm gonna wrap it up pretty fast, but I ended up spending months making publicity for my case. Then one day, I'm walking in New York, 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I get a call that says, restricted, Washington, D.C. So I pick it up, and I'm like, hello? And they're like, hi, is this Adela? And I'm like, yes. They're like, hi, we're calling you from the White House. Were you expecting our call? Yeah, 100%. What's up? They say President Trump heard about your case and he thinks that anti-Semitism is a huge problem on college campuses. Would you speak at a conference with him? It would be his honor to introduce you. And I thought about it, and I decided to take the platform. So I did show up in Miami to that conference, and President Trump stood on stage, he introduced me. I stood at the presidential podium, and I spoke about how I sued NYU for anti-Semitism. Now, after the conference, about 3 days later, I get a call from his team. And they tell me, thank you for coming to speak. I said, absolutely. They said, you shed light on a really important issue. I said, thank you for giving me the platform. And they said, we just want to let you know that later today, effective immediately, President Trump is going to sign an executive order to officially expand the definition of Judaism to fall as an ethno-religion, thereby being protected under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Now, I don't want to keep you too long, but I want to let you know that when I was your age, Club Z didn't exist. I didn't have this. I didn't have this amazing network of students around the country supporting me and supporting each other. I didn't have the education that you guys have. And if you would have told me when I was in high school, you're gonna go to NYU, you're gonna sue your school, you're gonna meet a sitting president of the United States, and you're gonna change the application of a law on a national level, I would have told you you were crazy. But now I understand the power that one voice can have. Because when I made my decision to sue NYU, I did it so no other NYU student would go through what I went through. I never thought it would have a national consequence. And that's the power every single one of you has. And I know that when I come back here in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, it'll be you standing up here telling your story. It'll be you at the presidential podium. And it will be you because you are the Jewish future. Thank you. Now, I know I already went over my time. We were supposed to have Q&A. If I don't have the green light for Q&A, I do have the green light. Okay, great.
If you have a question, please line up in an orderly line in front of the 2 microphones. Please introduce yourself, what chapter you're from, and ask your questions. We'll have time for a few questions. Adela will also be here the entire weekend, so if you do not get your question now, you can find her throughout the weekend and ask your question personally.
While everyone's lining up, I'd love to show you guys a quick video, but make your way to the microphones.
In orderly fashion.
But sadly, BDS has also made disturbing headway on American college campuses. You know that, don't you? Here with us today is Adela Cojab, a recent graduate of New York University, who courageously stood for Israel in the face of hostility and bigotry. Incredible hostility and incredible bigotry. Adela, would you please come up and quickly, or not quickly, any way you want, share your story. Please come up. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Adela Cojab, and 6 months ago, I took legal action against NYU, only 2 weeks before graduation. My university failed to protect its Jewish community from ongoing harassment, from attacks on social media to resolutions on student government, to boycotts, flag burnings, and physical assault. The physical assaults ended in 2 arrests, and the university didn't stand idly. Instead, they gave an anti-Israel hate group the President's Service Award, the highest honor you can receive as a group on campus. I was notified my case was accepted by the Department of Education, and an investigation has been launched against NYU for failure to protect its community. To all of the students in the audience today, don't be afraid to stand up, because you deserve better. And as an immigrant myself from Mexico City, I am extremely thankful to live in a country where the Office of Civil Rights takes the concerns of Jewish students seriously. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you all for supporting the work that we do on campus.
All right, question number 1.
All right, I just want to ask, like, what age, like, did you, like, decide you wanted to pursue this? Like, when did you want to, like, you know, kind of make this, like, a goal of yours to kind of speak out, you know?
So that's a great question. I've always been very outspoken, but like I said on the panel earlier, I really thought it was going to be on the human rights end at the United Nations, because I thought they actually did something. So I always wanted to be outspoken. I realized at the end of my freshman year, I want to do it for my people, at least beginning with my people. And I made the decision to sue NYU. So I became very active in politics, all of that, defended against all the BDS resolutions my junior year. But it wasn't until my senior year, I was about 21 years old, that's when I made the decision to sue. And from there, my life changed. After I sued NYU, I went on speaking tours. I became a public speaker. I worked as a full-time activist for 2 years at the Maccabee Task Force, helping students in college be able to navigate BDS resolutions and anti-Semitism. After those 2 years, I realized that I wasn't being useful anymore, right? Because what I know is college campus anti-Semitism. And 2 years ago, COVID hit, 3 years ago, and anti-Semitism moved online. So instead of students asking me, hey, how do I fight this BDS resolution? They would ask me, hey, how do I respond to this TikTok? And I said, I actually don't know. So I realized it wasn't useful. I decided, where do I have the most utility? Through the law. So when I was 24, I decided to go to law school so I could do this full time. Now I'm also a TikTok influencer, which is so weird. Right now my account's down because I was getting a lot of death threats. I went viral in Indonesia. They don't like me there. It's bad. So for now, I'm dark, and I'm only on Instagram. But ultimately, it was when I was in college. In college, I said, this is a very big part of me. And at the end of college, I said, this is what I need to do. And then when I went to law school, I was going to be a prosecutor. I had my offer from the district attorney. And I decided, as of October 7th, that I would turn it down, because for the next 2 years, my community needs me. Next question.
My name is Joseph, and I'm from the Brooklyn chapter. My question is, what was the result of the lawsuit?
Great question. So, basically, most of these lawsuits will never make it to court. Almost all of them are going to settle. So, after the executive order, NYU was like, ooh, this might be a problem. So they quickly decided to settle. Now, people ask me, what do you get from the lawsuit? I did not sue at all for damages, not a single penny. I could have asked for a lot, but I did not. And I really just sued for them to define anti-Semitism and include anti-Semitism in their existing discrimination policy. Now, when I talk about lawsuits and NYU, all of this, one of the questions I get from non-Jewish people is, well, why should Jewish people get special treatment? And I say it's the exact opposite. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act already exists to protect minorities. Every school already has an anti-discrimination policy. If you're going to be protecting minorities, you have to protect all minorities. You can't pick and choose. My lawsuit isn't about special treatment for Jewish students. No, no, no. It's about equal treatment for Jewish students. And that's what I was trying to achieve. And now that settlement is being used as a rubric for all the students who are suing their schools today. So you never know how far of a reach you're going to have. Any more questions?
Hi, I'm Naomi from Charlotte, and
Woo!
and I wanted to ask, was this lawsuit part of your inspiration to become a lawyer, and what do you plan to do once you become one?
Great question. So I always wanted to be a lawyer when I was little. Again, I thought I'd be a human rights lawyer, and I am, but in a different kind of way. But yeah, definitely it was a very big push. Actually, when I applied to law schools, my whole application essay was about fighting for religious liberty rights and about suing NYU to make sure that Jewish students have equal protection, right? And you can imagine that when I applied to law schools, and my whole essay was about suing schools, NYU didn't quite want me back. So it was a little bit different. I did have to pivot. I actually got a full scholarship from Yeshiva University. I'm really happy to be there. It's definitely the biggest push. I'll get to the end in a second. But yeah, basically, I'm still going to fully pursue civil rights, human rights, and maybe, hopefully, when all the anti-Semitism dies down, I'll go back into criminal law. Great question.
Hi, my name is Becky. I'm from Colorado, and you said that in your lawsuit you asked NYU to define anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. Did that include anti-Zionism?
So yes and no. I had originally asked in my lawsuit for them to adopt IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance definition of anti-Semitism, which clearly states that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Now, because my case was the first of its kind, we really couldn't ask for too much. And we knew that just settling with them including it would be enough of a victory to be the foot in the door. So they didn't exactly include anti-Zionism, but they did include shared ancestry. And I can tell you, for example, when we sing Hatikva in the park and that girl was assaulted, we weren't singing Hatikva because we're Israeli, we sang it because we were Jewish and it's part of our shared ancestry. When that flag went up in flames, it wasn't a symbol of Israel per se, it was a symbol of my shared ancestry and my Zionism. Every Jewish student in the park was feeling that their shared ancestry was being attacked. So essentially, no, but yes, because our shared ancestry is Zionism.
When you were talking about writing the letter about the initial anti-Semitism you had in your school, and specifically how anti-Zionism was listed in the same category as fascism and Nazism, you mentioned that one Jewish group, if I correctly, declined to sign on to the other. Which one was it and why?
Great question. That group is called Jewish Voice for Peace. And if you haven't heard of them, it's very important that you do, because in a couple of years, each of you will be in a college campus. Now, I don't have anything against people in JVP, and you should know that they are in no way less Jewish than we are, but they're confused and misguided. The reason why Jews become anti-Zionist is because they were shunned by their own community. And they realized that to become accepted by a whole new community that will support you wholeheartedly, all you have to do is be a Jew that says you hate Israel. And that's called tokenization. And the reason why it's an issue is because, when you come to think about it, no one, not a single SS officer ever asked a Jew if they were Jewish. They just were. On October 7th, when the terrorists infiltrated Israel, they didn't go up to people and say, hey, you're Israeli, but do you support rights for Palestinians in Gaza? No one asked them. No one asked them. Actually, I went to Israel 3 weeks after October 7th, with the World Jewish Congress is actually here today. And when we were there, we met with survivors of Kfar Aza, which is one of the kibbutzim that was hardest hit. They're, I think, about 7 kilometers from the border of Gaza. And when we met with the survivors, they were telling us the story of one woman in particular who was murdered by the terrorists, who dedicated her whole life to coexistence and volunteering in Gaza. No one asked her. She was their biggest cheerleader, but no one asked, because at the end of the day, for them, a Jew is a Jew. So unfortunately, it was JVP. And when you see JVP students on your campus, don't roll your eyes. Say hello. Approach them. Become their friends. Don't talk politics at all. Sit them down for coffee, just for fun. Invite them to a Shabbat dinner. Because I promise you, if they feel accepted by the Jewish community, they won't turn against it. Now, I'll say one more thing on that, 2 more things. First off, there's only 16 million of us, and that's a very small number. To put it into perspective, do you guys know who has the most Instagram followers right now? Selena Gomez. Selena Gomez. It's Selena Gomez, yes. Selena Gomez, I think right now she has 450 million. I want to put this into perspective. 450 million followers. That means that if every single Jew in the world followed a single Instagram account, we wouldn't even have 10%, we wouldn't even have 1% of the following Selena Gomez has. Do you realize how insane that is? It's an insane number. There's so few of us that every single one of us has the opportunity to stand up whether or not you want it, like they said earlier today. And it also means that even though we are strong and we are stronger together, we can't be strong alone. And without allies, there is no way that we can continue to exist the way that we do. It is an existential threat. Now, the very last thing I'll say about that, because we talked about it, is I always say that there are 2 regrets I have, but I wouldn't do them differently. And the reason why I wouldn't do them differently, number 1, not publishing the letter, and number 2, walking out of that office trusting the school to take action when I knew in my heart they wouldn't. The reason why I regret it, but I wouldn't do it differently, is because that landed me on this stage. And I'm gonna tell you that you're gonna go to college, and you're gonna be there for 4 years. And guess what? Probably what happened to me isn't gonna happen to you. But I can guarantee that at some point in those 4 years, you're gonna have the moment. You're gonna have the moment where one of your professors says something anti-Semitic, or a student organization posts something, or says something, or they start ganging up on Jewish students, or a demonstration starts, or they hang a certain flag. You're gonna have that moment where you ask yourself, do I sit down, keep my head down, write essays, and get the paper that gets me an A? Or do I actually say something? Right now, you see me as a strong activist, but I was just a student. And I was afraid because I knew drawing attention to the issue might make it temporarily bigger. But I can tell you that when people want to hate, they're going to hate. So you might as well stand up for yourself. I regret those 2 moments because I know they were moments of weakness. But I wouldn't do them differently because even from moments of weaknesses, you grow. And I want all of you to know when you hit your moment in college that you can stand up and you have no idea how far your voice is going to go. Any more questions? All right, I think we're all set. I will be here all weekend, so make sure to say hello to me. I'm gonna be coming around to your tables during all the meals. It's gonna be weird. I'm gonna sit down, we're gonna chat, it's gonna be fun. So thank you, everyone.
Right.